Captain Kira pressed her clawed hand against the cool metal of the command console as the Void Seeker drifted through the empty darkness of space. Her purple eyes, typical of the Zephyrian species, reflected the strange readings dancing across her screens. 3 standard rotations ago, their deep space sensors had picked up something that made no sense: massive metal objects in a system that should have been completely dead. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Science Officer Nex from his station. His forearms worked frantically across multiple displays, his scaled skin shifting from blue to worried green. "These aren't asteroids or space debris. I'm reading hundreds of artificial structures, each one bigger than our largest battleships." Kira moved across the bridge with the fluid grace of her people. The Void Seeker was a small exploration craft built for long journeys into uncharted space. Its crew of 12 had been mapping empty systems for the Galactic Federation for over 2 years now. They were used to finding dead rocks and gas clouds, not whatever was showing up on their sensors. "Magnify the display," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority that had earned her this command at such a young age. The main screen flickered and suddenly filled with an image that made the entire bridge crew fall silent. Stretching across the void in perfect geometric patterns were hundreds of massive ships. Each vessel was dark gray, their hulls scarred but intact. They hung motionless around a blue and green planet, like sleeping giants guarding their world. "By the 7 moons of Zephy," whispered Pilot Dex, his tentacles curling with nervousness. "Those ships are enormous. Look at the size comparison readings." The computer was already calculating dimensions. The smallest vessel in the formation was over 5 kilometers long. The largest stretched nearly 20 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with what looked like weapon ports and sensor arrays. Their design was angular and aggressive, built for war rather than exploration. "I've never seen anything like this in Federation records," Nex reported, his excitement overcoming his fear. "The metal composition is unlike any known alloy. These ships are old, Captain. Really old. But they're not decaying like they should be." Kira studied the formation with a tactical eye. Her people had been soldiers before they became explorers, and she could recognize military precision when she saw it. "This isn't random. Look at their positioning." The ships were arranged in concentric circles around the planet, each ring containing vessels of similar size. The largest battleships formed the outer perimeter, while smaller cruisers and support vessels filled the inner rings. It was a defensive formation designed to protect something precious. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Vex from her station, "I'm not detecting any energy signatures from the ships. No life signs, no active systems, nothing. It's like they're completely powered down." "Or sleeping," Dex muttered, immediately looking embarrassed for speaking out of turn. But Kira nodded thoughtfully. "No, you might be right. This looks too organized to be a battlefield graveyard. Someone arranged these ships this way on purpose." She walked closer to the main display, studying the planet at the center of the formation. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight with unexpected emotion. Blue oceans sparkled under the light of a yellow star, while green and brown continents showed the unmistakable signs of a world that had once been alive with vegetation. "Scan the planet," she ordered. "I want to know what's down there." Nex's instruments painted a clearer picture within moments. The atmosphere is still breathable, mostly nitrogen and oxygen. I'm detecting water, plant life, even some animal signatures, but no cities, no technology, no signs of current civilization. "What about past civilization?" Kira pressed. "That's the strange part, Captain. I'm reading massive ruins scattered across several continents. Whatever species lived here built on a scale that rivals Federation worlds, but the ruins are ancient, covered by centuries of growth." The bridge fell quiet, except for the soft hum of ship systems. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but it was young navigator Zach who finally voiced it. What if the planet's inhabitants built this fleet? What if they're still in those ships somehow? Kira felt a chill run through her body. The idea was both fascinating and terrifying. An unknown species with technology, advanced enough to build ships that dwarfed anything the Federation possessed. Ships that had been waiting in perfect formation for who knew how long. "Captain," Nex said quietly, I'm detecting some kind of automated systems on the nearest vessel. Very low power, almost. Like a heartbeat. Whatever these ships are, they're not completely dead. The decision hung in the air like a physical weight. They could mark the location and return to Federation space with their report. Let the military and the scientists decide what to do next. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice. But Kira had not become the youngest exploration captain in Zephyrian history by playing it safe. Dex, bring us alongside the nearest ship. Find us a docking port or an airlock. Next, prepare full environmental suits and scanning equipment. Vex, record everything and prepare an emergency beacon to Federation Command. She turned to address her entire crew, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about. To attempt, we're going aboard. Whatever secrets these ships hold, we're going to be the first to discover them. The airlock hissed open with a sound that echoed through centuries of silence. Captain Kira stepped into the massive ship first, her environmental suit's lights cutting through the absolute darkness. The air was so cold that frost immediately formed on her helmet's visor, and the silence felt heavy, like walking into a tomb. "Stay close," she whispered into her comm unit as her team followed behind. Science Officer Nex carried advanced scanning. He equipment, while Pilot Dex and 2 security officers formed a protective circle around them. Their footsteps rang out against metal floors that hadn't felt the touch of living beings for longer than their civilization had existed. The corridor they entered was enormous, built for beings much larger than Kira's crew had expected. The ceiling stretched high above them, and the walls were lined with panels covered in angular symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the light of their torches. "Captain," Nex's voice was tight with excitement. "These symbols aren't random decoration. They're some kind of information storage system, and look at this metal composition." He ran his scanner along the wall, and the readings made him step back in surprise. "This alloy is stronger than anything we have in Federation space. These beings knew metallurgy that we haven't even dreamed of." As they moved deeper into the ship, something incredible happened. Their footsteps, the vibrations from their movement, began triggering systems that had waited in darkness for 500,000 years. Strip lights along the floor began to glow with a soft blue radiance, creating a pathway that led them forward, like the ship itself was guiding them. "The ship is responding to us," Dex whispered, his tentacles curling with nervousness. "It knows. We're here." Emergency lighting suddenly blazed to life in sections, revealing the true scale of what they had entered. This wasn't just a ship, it was a floating city. Corridors branched off in every direction, leading to levels above and below them that seemed to go on forever. But it was what lined these corridors that made the entire team stop breathing. Thousands upon thousands of sealed pods stretched as far as their lights could reach. Each pod was about the size needed for a humanoid being, made of the same incredible metal as the ship's hull. Soft displays on each pod showed vital signs, heartbeats, brain activity, life signs that had been steady for centuries. "They're alive," Nex breathed, pressing his scanner against the nearest pod. "Whatever's in these containers, they're in some kind of perfect hibernation. Not dead, not dying, just sleeping." Kira approached one of the pods and peered through its transparent aluminum window. Inside lay a creature unlike anything in Federation records. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and stood upright like many intelligent species, but its features were unique. Smooth skin, hair covering the top of its head, and even in sleep, its face showed determination and strength. "Look at the muscle development," one of the security officers observed. These beings were built for combat. As they explored further, more systems came online. Archive computers began humming with power, and suddenly the air filled with holographic displays. Images of the sleeping beings appeared everywhere, some in military uniforms, others in scientific clothing, all sharing that same look of fierce determination. The universal translator in Kira's suit worked frantically, processing the alien language that began flowing from the awakening systems. Words and phrases started making sense, and what they revealed sent chills through the exploration team. They called themselves humans, Kira read from the translated text appearing on her display. "This fleet represents their finest warriors, their greatest minds, their last hope." More information flooded their systems. These humans had been soldiers, scientists, engineers, and leaders, the best their species could produce, all placed in hibernation aboard these massive ships. The archives showed images of their training, humans practicing combat techniques that would make Federation Marines look like children, scientists working on technologies that bent the laws of physics, engineers building weapons that could crack planets in half. "Captain, you need to see this," Nex called from deeper in the archive chamber. A massive holographic display had activated, showing the face of a human in military dress. Even in the frozen image, his eyes held the weight of impossible decisions. The translation system finally unlocked his words, and Admiral Minho's final message began to play. His voice was calm, but carried the gravity of a species facing extinction. 2. Whoever finds this fleet, know that we are humanity's final gift to the galaxy. Our world faces an enemy that consumes everything in its path. We have sent our children away not in retreat, but in hope. We sleep until Earth calls us home. When we wake, we will finish what others started. The message continued, explaining how these ships contained not just warriors, but the complete knowledge of human civilization. Every scientific discovery, every military strategy, every piece of technology that had taken their species millennia to develop was stored in these vessels. They didn't just evacuate their people, Kira realized with growing awe. They evacuated their entire civilization's potential, but it was the final part of Admiral Minho's message that made the exploration team's blood run cold. The enemy we face has destroyed 1,000 worlds before ours. They are ancient, relentless, and they will not stop until every living thing in the galaxy serves their purpose. If you have found us, pray that you never encounter what we fought, but if you do, wake us. Humanity's watch is not yet over. The holographic display flickered and died, leaving the team in stunned silence. Around them, thousands of pods continued, their silent vigil, each containing a human warrior or scientist who had sacrificed everything for a chance their species might survive. "Captain," Nex's voice was barely a whisper, "the ship's long-range sensors are activating. Something's triggered an automatic wake-up protocol. Deep within the ship's core, systems that had slumbered for 500,000 years began their final countdown. Humanity's greatest gamble was about to pay off, but not in any way their sleeping warriors could have imagined. The archive chamber hummed with ancient power as Captain Kira and her team dove deeper into humanity's hidden history. What they discovered made even seasoned space explorers question everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The holographic displays painted a picture of a civilization that had reached heights the Galactic Federation could barely imagine. Earth hadn't been just another world with intelligent life. It had been home to beings who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. "Look at these population records," Nex said, his forearms dancing across multiple data streams. At their peak, humans numbered in the billions across dozens of worlds. They had colonies in 3 different star systems and were expanding rapidly. The archives showed images of human cities that stretched from horizon to horizon, with buildings that reached into the clouds and transportation systems that moved millions of people faster than light itself. Their technology wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. But then the records took a dark turn. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting something that should have been impossible. Entire star systems were going dark, not from war or natural disaster, but from something that consumed everything in its path. "The Devourers," Kira read from the translated files, her voice heavy with the weight of ancient tragedy. "Machine intelligences older than most species in the galaxy. They don't conquer worlds, they consume them completely." The holographic displays showed humanity's first encounters with these ancient enemies, ships the size of moons, made of materials that seemed to absorb light itself. When they arrived at a system, they would systematically dismantle everything, planets, moons, asteroids, even the star itself, converting all matter into more of themselves. "This is impossible," whispered Dex, watching recorded battles between human fleets and the Devourers. "Look at those weapons. Human ships were firing concentrated energy beams that could vaporize entire mountains. What amazed the exploration team most was that humanity hadn't just run when faced with this ancient threat. They had fought back with a creativity and determination that defied logic. The archives showed human engineers working around the clock to develop new weapons, new shields, new strategies to fight an enemy that had destroyed civilizations for millions of years. Their strategy was brilliant, Nex explained to his assembled crewmates as they absorbed the scope of human planning. They knew they probably couldn't win a direct fight against something that ancient and powerful, so they created the ultimate insurance policy. The human leadership had made an impossible choice. Instead of keeping their best warriors and brightest minds on Earth for the final battle, they loaded them into these massive ships and sent them away, not as refugees, but as humanity's gift to whatever universe might exist after the Devourers finished their work. The archives revealed the incredible individuals who had been chosen for this fleet. Engineer Jiho, whose quantum manipulation theories had allowed humans to build weapons that could crack planets like eggs. His designs were stored in the ship's memory banks, along with detailed instructions for building devices that could reshape reality itself. Warrior Hyun, who had trained entire armies in combat techniques that treated physics as suggestions rather than laws. The combat archives showed humans moving faster than the eye could follow, using armor that made them nearly invulnerable, wielding weapons that could cut through any known material. Scientist Suna, whose breakthrough discoveries had unlocked secrets of space and time that the Federation's greatest minds still struggled to understand. Her research notes described ways to fold space that could move entire fleets across the galaxy in moments, or create pocket dimensions where time moved differently. They weren't just sending away soldiers, Kira realized as she studied the personnel records. They were preserving the future evolution of their entire species. Each pod in the massive hibernation bays contained not just a person, but a living library of human knowledge and potential. Artists who could create beauty that moved entire civilizations to tears, leaders who could inspire hope in the darkest hours, teachers who could pass on wisdom accumulated over millennia. But perhaps most incredible of all were the weapon systems stored throughout the fleet. The archives showed humanity's final generation of warfare technology, devices that could manipulate gravity, weapons that fired concentrated dark matter, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They were waiting for an all-clear signal from Earth, Pilot Dex said quietly, reading from the operational protocols. Once the Devourers were defeated, Earth was supposed to send a coded transmission that would wake the fleet and bring them home. The exploration team fell silent as they processed what this meant. They turned their attention to the planet below, studying it with new understanding. Earth still hung there in space, blue and green and beautiful, but the scars were visible once you knew what to look for. Massive craters marked where human cities had once stood. Mountain ranges had been leveled. Entire continents showed signs of having been systematically strip-mined, but the Devourers were gone and somehow Earth had survived. The signal never came, Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. Earth fought its final battle and won, but there was no one left to wake up their children. The planet below was slowly healing. Forests had regrown over the ruins of human civilization. Oceans had cleansed themselves of the residue of ancient battles. Animals had returned to lands that had once been battlefields. But humanity's greatest heroes continued to sleep, waiting for a call that would never come from a world that had forgotten they existed. 500,000 years, Nex calculated, checking the ship's chronometer systems. They'd been sleeping for 500,000 years, while their world healed and the galaxy moved on without them. As if responding to their presence, more ship systems began coming online throughout the fleet. Lights were flickering to life on dozens of other vessels. Communication networks were establishing connections between ships. Weapon systems were running diagnostic checks. The sleeping giants were beginning to stir, and the galaxy was about to remember why humanity had once been feared by enemies older than time itself. The first signs of trouble came as soft warning chimes throughout the massive ship. What had started as a simple exploration had triggered something far beyond Captain Kira's worst nightmares. The ancient hibernation systems, dormant for 500,000 years, began cascading into full awakening. Protocols across the entire fleet. Deep within the ship's core, Admiral Bora's pod hissed open with a sound like escaping steam. Preservation fluid drained away as her body began the delicate process of returning to full consciousness. Her eyes opened slowly, pupils adjusting, to light after centuries of darkness, and what she saw made every instinct scream danger. Strange alien faces stared down at her through environmental helmets. Purple eyes, scaled skin, multiple arms. Nothing in her extensive military training had prepared her for this moment. But Admiral Bora hadn't been chosen to lead humanity's greatest fleet because she panicked easily. Her hand moved with lightning speed toward the emergency controls built into her hibernation chamber. 500,000 years of sleep hadn't. Dulled reflexes honed through decades of combat training. Her fingers found the fleet-wide alert beacon, ready to wake every sleeping warrior in the armada. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain who you are and why you're here," she said, her voice calm but carrying the authority of someone who had commanded entire star systems. Her eyes never left Captain Kira's face, reading micro-expressions and body language with the skill of a master tactician. Captain Kira felt sweat forming inside her environmental suit, despite the ship's cold temperature. She had encountered many dangerous situations in her exploration career, but nothing compared to the focused intensity in this human's gaze. This wasn't just a person waking from sleep. This was a predator assessing threats. "We are explorers from the Galactic Federation," Kira said quickly, raising her hands to show she carried no weapons. "We detected your fleet and came to investigate. We meant no harm to you or your people." But Admiral Bora's tactical mind was already processing what she wasn't hearing. No response from Earth. No familiar human voices on the communication channels. Her ship's systems were reporting that the fleet had been in hibernation far longer than originally planned. Throughout the massive vessel, more humans began stirring to life. The cascade failure in the hibernation network was spreading like wildfire, triggering awakening protocols that hadn't been used since humanity's darkest hour. Commander Tay's pod opened 3 levels below, and his first action was to roll toward the nearest weapons control panel. His fingers moved across interfaces that responded to his touch as if he had used them yesterday, bringing defensive systems online throughout the ship. Particle beam cannons that could vaporize asteroids hummed to life. Shield generators that could deflect planet-killing attacks began charging. Chief Engineer Leah emerged from her pod in the ship's engineering section, immediately reading system displays that told her everything she needed to know. The ship's massive engines, each one capable of moving the vessel faster than light itself, began their startup sequences. Leah's hands flew across control panels, running diagnostics on technology that made Federation starships look like children's toys. "Primary engines at 15% and climbing," she reported over internal communications. "All systems showing green after 500,000 years in hibernation. These ships were built to last." Dr. Wu awakened in the medical bay, and her first action was to activate sophisticated scanning equipment pointed at the alien intruders. Her instruments could analyze the molecular structure of any living being, breaking down their biology to understand weaknesses and strengths. What she discovered about the Zephyrians made her pause in amazement. "Admiral," she reported through the ship's communication system, "these beings show no signs of deception or hostile intent. Their stress hormones indicate they're more afraid of us than we should be of them." But across the fleet, hundreds of other ships were experiencing similar awakenings. Human warriors who had trained for battles against impossible odds were opening their eyes to find their worst fears realized. Earth was silent, and unknown aliens had discovered their hiding place. Captain Kira watched in growing terror as alarm lights began flashing throughout the ship. She could hear the deep humming of massive weapon systems powering up, feel the vibrations through the deck as engines larger than her entire vessel began their startup procedures. "We're explorers, not enemies," she said desperately. "But Admiral," Bora's expression remained unreadable, "the Galactic Federation has maintained peace for centuries. We've never encountered your species before, but we have protocols for first contact." "Federation?" Admiral Bora repeated, her tactical mind immediately analyzing this new information. "How long have we been sleeping? What happened to Earth? Where are the Devourers?" The questions came rapid fire, each one revealing more about humanity's situation. They had gone to sleep expecting to wake up to either victory or total destruction. Instead, they had awakened to find the galaxy had moved on without them. On the ship's bridge, human officers were taking their stations, with practiced efficiency. Navigation systems that could calculate jumps across galactic distances came online. Communication arrays powerful enough to contact ships in other star systems began scanning for familiar signals that would never come. "Admiral," reported the ship's tactical officer, "I'm detecting no human signals anywhere in this system. Earth appears to be inhabited, but not by our people. The other ships in our fleet are beginning to wake up, and they're all asking the same questions we are." Admiral Bora's hand hovered over the emergency beacon. One touch would wake every human in the fleet, bringing to consciousness the greatest military force their species had ever assembled. But these aliens seemed genuinely peaceful, and rushing into action without understanding the situation could be catastrophic. "Captain Kira," she said, her voice carrying the weight of impossible decisions. "You're going to tell me everything. What year is it by your calendar? What happened to the species that built this fleet? And most importantly, what became of the ancient enemy we were sent to fight?" As alarms continued to sound throughout the massive ship, both species realized they were balanced on the edge of either the galaxy's greatest disaster or its most incredible opportunity. Admiral Bora stood in the command center of humanity's flagship, listening as Captain Kira described a galaxy that sounded like paradise. The Galactic Federation, she explained, was a peaceful alliance of over 300 species that had thrived for millennia. Wars were ancient history. Conflicts were resolved through diplomacy. Technology was shared freely among member worlds. But Admiral Bora's mind, trained through decades of military analysis, began noticing things that Captain Kira's peaceful species had missed. She pulled up the Federation's historical records on the ship's holographic displays, scanning through centuries of data with the focused intensity of a hunter tracking prey. "These disappearances," she said suddenly, her finger pointing to scattered reports throughout Federation history. Entire civilizations vanishing without any trace. No distress calls, no debris fields, no survivors. Just empty star systems where thriving worlds used to be. Captain Kira looked confused. "Those are rare anomalies, Admiral. Perhaps natural disasters or species that chose to leave their home systems. The galaxy is vast, and not everything can be explained." "No," Admiral Bora's voice carried the certainty of someone who had seen this pattern before. "Look at the timing. Every few thousand years, multiple civilizations disappear simultaneously across different sectors. Always the most advanced ones. Always the ones with the strongest military capabilities." She manipulated the display, showing star charts that revealed the terrible truth. The disappearances formed a spiral pattern, moving slowly through the galaxy, like something methodically, hunting the strongest species and consuming them before moving on to the next region. "They're the same pattern as the Devourers," Admiral Bora whispered, her blood running cold. "They're not gone. They've been feeding this entire time, just slowly enough that no one noticed." Captain Kira was about to respond when every alarm on the ship began screaming at once. The bridge erupted in flashing red lights as sensors detected incoming contacts that made even seasoned human veterans step back in shock. "Admiral," called out the tactical officer, his voice tight with controlled fear. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive contacts approaching from deep space. Energy signatures match historical records of Devourer vessels. On the main display, dark shapes began resolving out of the void, ships the size of small moons, their hulls so black they seemed to absorb light itself, ancient beyond measure. They moved with the terrible patience of predators who had never known defeat. Admiral Bora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. These were the enemy that had destroyed her homeworld, the ancient machines that consumed entire civilizations. Somehow, they had detected the awakening of humanity's fleet and come to finish what they had started 500,000 years ago. "Battle. Stations," she commanded, her voice carrying across the fleet's communication network with the authority of absolute command. "All ships, this is Admiral Bora. The enemy we were sent to fight still lives. Humanity's watch is not over. Throughout the massive fleet, Humans who had slept for centuries snapped into action with the efficiency of the galaxy's finest military force. Weapon systems that had slumbered in darkness roared to life with devastating power. Shield generators created barriers that could withstand planet-killing attacks. Engines designed by humanity's greatest minds began moving ships into formations that no enemy had ever survived. Captain Kira watched in amazement as the human fleet transformed from a collection of sleeping vessels into the most terrifying military force she had ever witnessed. Ships that dwarfed Federation battleships moved with graceful precision, their weapon ports glowing with barely contained energy. Commander Tay's voice crackled over the communication system from his ship's position. Quantum torpedoes armed and ready. Target locks established on lead Devourer vessels, Chief Engineer Leah reported from the engine room. All ships reporting full power. Faster-than-light engines ready for combat maneuvers that will make these ancient machines look like they're standing still. Dr. Wu's medical bay had transformed into a strategic analysis center. Biological weapon systems online. We still remember how to fight enemies that aren't truly alive. Admiral Bora turned to Captain Kira, her expression mixing grim determination with something that might have been pity. You wanted to know why Earth sent us away instead of keeping us for the final battle? You're about to understand why we were worth saving. The Devourer ships continued their approach, confident in their ancient power and the knowledge that they had destroyed every civilization foolish enough to challenge them. But they had never faced humanity at the height of its military evolution. Fleet. Formation Omega, Admiral Bora commanded. All ships engage on my mark. Show them that Earth's children remember how to fight. The human fleet spread out in a three-dimensional formation that used the laws of physics themselves as weapons. Ships capable of folding space positioned themselves to attack from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that manipulated. Gravity and dark matter charged to full power. Today, Admiral Bora announced to her fleet, we finish the war our ancestors started. Today we prove that some things in this galaxy are still worth dying for. The ancient enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years was about to discover that humanity had spent 500,000 years becoming something far more dangerous than they remembered. Captain Kira and her crew watched in awe as humanity's greatest gamble finally paid off. The warriors Earth had sent to the stars were about to show the galaxy why they had been humanity's final desperate hope. The end.